Hi, my name is Austin Gill. You can find me pretty much everywhere at Stegosaurus. I'm a full stack developer at Reveal Biosciences. We do cool stuff, and we're hiring. And I am the author of a library called Vuetensils. So first of all, I want to say the Vue community is really awesome. It's super welcoming. I've never been to another conference that gets this personal. Anyway, so we're going to be talking about communicating between components by talking about building an application for my dog, Nugget. So some of Nugget's favorite activities are going to be food, sleep, squirrels, and he wants me to provide him with a checkbox where he can turn on his favorite activities on or off. And I'm going to do that with a parent component and a child component. I need to communicate which checkboxes are on and off. So the way we do that with Vue, one way is props and events. So with props, I want to accept an array of my checkboxes. So I define my props attribute, and I define my options there, set it to a type of array. And then somewhere in my template, I'm going to loop over that array of options. I'm going to have an input, and I'm going to pass set the checked attribute to each option's checked. So that's the data coming down from the parent to the child. And then on the next line, you'll see that there's the change event listener, and we have the onChange handler. So Vue gives us this event system where we can have some logic when each checkbox is checked to figure out what changed in our array and then send that data up to the parent through a custom event called update. And we send the updates up. The parent-child relationship looks like this. We have our parent, we have our child, and then we pass the options from the parent into the child through the options prop, and we pass the options, or we listen to the update event to pass the options back up to the parent to update it. So that was one. Next thing Nugget needs is a way for me to tell him that I love him, and maybe some other different things that I'm going to do in a modal. So this dialogue component is a little bit more complicated because it has a lot of other different content in there. It's got a title and some text and a button, so we probably don't want to use props for that. Instead, what we'll use is slots. And slots are really easy. They allow us to create some layout that's going to be shared across different instances of that component, but then have very dynamic content in the middle by having the layout and then just the slot there in the middle. And the way it looks in a parent is we have our parent component, we have our child inside, and anything inside that child tag is dynamic or complicated content that will go where the slot was placed. Next, Nugget likes to play fetch. He likes to fetch balls and sticks and API requests. So a good use for that is going to be scope slots. Now, one of the issues that we have to deal with when we're talking about making API requests is loading states, errors, and results. And we don't necessarily want all of our content, all of our requests to be presented in the same template the same way. So we need to pass that data up to the parent in a different way. And it makes sense to have a component that abstracts and compartmentalizes those different statuses. So depending the results, the error, we can put that in our data function so that it's reactive. And to pass that data back up to the parent, we do something similar with our previous example with slots, but we bind that data to that slot with the vbind and static example that we have here. By binding to our slot, we can now implement our child in the parent, and we can put in that default slot section, and we can pass in an arbitrary name, which in this case I'm using status, to access the data that was passed up from the slot to this child instance. And in there I can see I have access to the status pending, the error, and the results, which is actually a really awesome pattern if you haven't used it before, because now my template can be whatever I want it to be. Very flexible. So the next thing the Nugget needs is notifications, so that whenever anywhere from my application, I can tell him, I can send him little pop-outs that say, who's a good boy, you're a good boy, please stop dragging your butt on the carpet. So a pattern that we can use for this is the event bus. And the event bus is great because it lets us tap into Vue's event system with a very isolated instance. The event bus looks like this. We can create a completely new Vue instance separate from our default application. And once we have that Vue instance, that's basically the event bus. And because we've exported it from one file location, we can import it to different locations. So for example, in our root application, or in our root component, we can import the notifications event bus, and we can have our event bus listen to a custom event called add, and we can pass it off to an event handler, which I ran out of room, so I had to shorten it a little bit. And then in a different component, anywhere in our application, it doesn't have to be a parent-child relationship. We can import the notifications event bus, and then we can have a click event handler that can emit that add event that will then be listened to at our root component. So this is a really good way to separate different events that are happening over your application and have them listen to each other. Now, Nugget's pretty happy. He thinks this application is going really well, and he wants to open it up to users. So now we're going to get into our application is reaching a very complicated level, and we have to account for user events. So when we have users, it's pretty common that we want to be able to access information about the user from all over the application. In our header, we want to show the username. On the profile page, we want to let them edit it, everything like that. And we want to be able to log out and all this. So we need to be able to read about the user and change the information about the user. Setting up a Vuex store is a little bit more ceremony, but it gives us a lot of benefit. And this is more or less what it looks like. You set your state. You have some functions that let you interact with your state or get data or change the data. And once you've set it up like this, the coolest thing about using Vuex is that now every single component in my application, without any sort of import, without any sort of other setup, gives me access to the store, which means I can access the store.state.username if the user's logged in. And every component in my application also has access to change information that's in the store. So I have actions and mutations in Vuex, and I can dispatch from any component. I can commit mutations from any component, and that'll let me communicate across my application from any component very easily. And the last thing that Nugget needs, because he's a dog, is he needs to know when it's time to eat. So Vue gives us, as of version 2.6, Vue gives us the Vue.Observable, which is really awesome. And the way that the event bus gave us access to Vue's event system, Observable gives us access to Vue's reactivity system, which is one of the most powerful things. Because sort of similar to the event bus, we can have an isolated, compact little piece of logic that just gives us some reactive data, and then we can export that and import it anywhere else in our application. So when Nugget needs to know whether his bowl is full of food, he can check and say, does it have food? And if not, he'll knock it over. And that's a true story. And in my side, I'll listen to the bowl being knocked over, and I'm in a component over here, and I say, oh, OK, Nugget's hungry. I better feed him. So I can import the bowl's observable, and I can have an event where I can update that. And at the same time, at the point that I update it, without doing anything else, that observable will set Nugget's bowl information to true. So that's it. We've built an awesome application. We're looking for VC funding. If you want to get in on the ground floor, now's your chance. If you have any questions about this or just want to see some other pictures about my cute dog, I'll be in the lobby.